Within a matter of days after publishing this video, the United States will play its first World Cup match in a tournament we are hosting with Canada and Mexico. The match will be at SoFi Stadium in the Los Angeles area, which has exactly zero rapid transit. The nearby Intuit Dome, which is also a major sporting event venue, also has zero rapid transit. Traffic is famously known for being a nightmare after many events at these venues, as well as at the nearby Kia Forum. And so, on the Saturday before the Americans play their first 2026 World Cup game at SoFi Stadium, I'm going to propose a subway line. Yes, a subway that goes to these venues. But not just to these venues, but also to LA's most underrated corridor, Western Avenue. It is a corridor overshadowed by Vermont Avenue about a mile to the east, which, yes, is a busier corridor than Western. But the Western Avenue corridor is no slouch either, as Line 207 on Western Avenue frequently averages over 25,000 riders per weekday. Ridership is literally higher on Western Avenue than on some of the corridors talked about for subway expansion in my hometown of New York City. And yet, it's not talked about because Western Avenue is kind of like the student who gets a high grade but doesn't get accolades because another student did just slightly better. So, let's propose a subway line that would serve Western Avenue in these sporting venues, among other places. The northern terminus would be at Western Avenue and Hollywood Boulevard, connecting with the Hollywood Western stop on the B line. The job density in the area is solid, but the population density is really strong, generally averaging 35,000 people per square mile to 40,000 people per square mile in the area around this stop. All of this makes this area a really good candidate for a terminal stop. I'd then have a stop at Western Avenue and Santa Monica Boulevard, connecting with the proposed rail line I have for Sunset and Santa Monica Boulevards. Population density is also very strong around this proposed stop. My only concern is that I could see the nearby 101 freeway potentially limiting utility of the stop. The following stop would be at Western Avenue and Beverly Boulevard. This connects with Line 14, which runs along Beverly Boulevard. Yet again, you have strong population density around this stop. And this time, you don't have a freeway limiting the number of people who might be interested in taking this line. I then have a stop at West 3rd Street. While this West 3rd stop makes for narrow stop spacing compared to what LA Metro generally has with its rail lines, I decided to be a bit of a rule breaker here, for the simple reason that the bus on West 3rd actually has significantly higher ridership than the line on Beverly. So, if I'm going to have this line stop at Beverly, I should absolutely have this stop at West 3rd too. The fact that I've proposed Metro Rapid for West 3rd only strengthens my argument for a stop there, I think. The following stop would be at Western Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard. This would connect with the D line, which is one of LA's two current subway lines. In addition to the high level of population density at this stop, there's also a high level of job density, meaning that this could be a destination stop for some heading to work. And, with the transfer to the D line, it could be a major transfer stop for those heading to or from downtown LA. We then head into a stretch of Western Avenue where it intersects with bus lines kind of frequently. Western Avenue intersects with bus lines at Olympic Boulevard, Pico Boulevard, Venice Boulevard, Washington Boulevard, and Adams Boulevard. So, where did I choose to have stops? I chose stops at Olympic, Pico, and Adams. Olympic is a no-brainer because Line 28 on Olympic averages over 10,000 riders on a weekday, thus making the bus there very important to have a connection with. Pico is also a no-brainer to me because I have an east-west light rail line proposed for that part of Pico, meaning that I saw it as imperative to connect my Western Avenue north-south line with my east-west line on Pico. And as for Adams, I chose to stop there because it is south of the 10. Being on the other side of a freeway It's kind of like being on another planet at times. Seriously. Besides, Adams is about a mile south of my Pico stop, and while I've shown some willingness to not adhere to Metro's 1 mile stop spacing, I don't see a reason to make the spacing more than 1 mile in a part of LA that is densely populated. The next stop would be at the current Expo and Western stop on the E line. So, you'd have yet another important connection with the busy light rail line. Not a whole lot else to say on this one, other than that it's interesting to see that ridership is nearly as high at the Expo and Western stop as it is at the Expo and Vermont stop. This is just another indicator of how underrated the Western Avenue corridor really is. I'd have 4 more stops before getting this line off of Western Avenue. Those stops would be at Vernon Avenue, Slauson Avenue, Florence Avenue, and Manchester Avenue. The first 3 stops intersect with bus lines that have roughly similar ridership with each other. Manchester's bus has lower ridership than the lines on the other 3. But it's also in Manchester where the line turns off of Western, as the proposed line heads towards Inglewood's venue complex. Manchester Avenue turns into Manchester Boulevard, and there'd be a stop at Manchester Boulevard and Crenshaw Boulevard. The stop would connect with Line 210, which I see as worthwhile, despite the less than stellar population density around this stop. The train line then turns off of Manchester Boulevard and onto Prairie Avenue. And on Prairie Avenue, there'd be a stop at Pinkay Drive. This stop would serve both the Kia Forum and SoFi Stadium. And then, a little bit to the south, at Prairie Avenue and Century Boulevard, I'd have a stop for the Intuit Dome, home of the Los Angeles Clippers and the NBA. So, if my proposal came to pass, all these venues would be served. Unfortunately, this doesn't, or didn't, if you're watching this later, exist for the World Cup. Over by the Intuit Dome stop, the train would turn onto Century Boulevard for a brief time, and then turn south onto Hawthorne Boulevard. The train would then serve a few stops that serve the cities of Hawthorne and Lawndale, which are the 35th and 51st most densely populated cities in the United States, as well as Lenox, a census-designated place that would be the 16th most densely populated city in the United States if it existed as a city. The first of these stops would be the Hawthorne-Lenox stop, where there's a connection to the C line. Both north of the highway and south of the highway, you'd be dealing with densely populated areas. The following 3 stops would be along Hawthorne Boulevard, at El Segundo Boulevard, Rosecrans Avenue, and Manhattan Beach Boulevard. All 3 stops serve densely populated census tracts, with population densities sometimes exceeding 20,000 people per square mile. The train takes 2 more turns, one onto Manhattan Beach Boulevard, and then one onto Crenshaw Boulevard. The reason I don't have this staying on Hawthorne Boulevard, for the record, is because of the overlap that would otherwise happen between this proposed line and the proposed K-line extension to Torrance. Assuming it does eventually happen, despite the best efforts of some politicians and some NIMBYs, the Manhattan Beach Boulevard and Crenshaw Boulevard intersection will have a stop, meant most of all to serve El Camino College. Given that the school has over 22,000 students, a stop here has the potential to be a significant ridership driver. There'd be a stop at Crenshaw Boulevard and Artesia Boulevard. The land use is mediocre, but the stop offers several bus connections. But even with the mediocre land use, there's a census tract near the stop with over 14,000 people per square mile. And the last stop would be at the Torrance Transit Center. As one may guess, the Transit Center would offer a ton of bus connections. And that is my proposed line for Western Avenue in the stadium area. Before going into thoughts on my line, I ask people to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content on imagining better mass transit in the United States. Now to my thoughts. Let's start by looking at the Western Avenue portion of the line. I must say again that the Western Avenue corridor gets a little overlooked when we talk about corridors that merit rail consideration. And I think I get why that's the case. It's only about a mile west of the Vermont Avenue corridor, which has even higher transit ridership overall than on Western Avenue. But Line 207 on Western has the highest ridership bus line in all of LA's metro system. And in my many hours of public transit research, I've thus far found only one bus line in all of the United States that gets higher ridership than Line 207 on Western. And that line is the bus line on 1st and 2nd Avenues in New York City. And yet, people have talked about a subway line down the entirety of 2nd Avenue in New York for many decades, while Western Avenue in Los Angeles gets kind of ignored. I hope to change that. While I get why Vermont is getting so much attention, we also need to have a conversation about improving transit on Western Avenue as well. Because ridership is way higher on Western than on many LA area corridors slated to get rapid transit of some form, as well as LA area corridors many fantasy maps propose for rapid transit. I hope that this video can at least prompt some conversation about transit improvements on Western, even if you might not agree with my entire route. Another part of the route that may prompt conversation is the portion to the south and west of the Western Avenue portion. Namely, the portion of the line that serves the Kia Forum, SoFi Stadium, and the Intuit Dome. I know serving this area is going to be controversial and difficult. After all, there was a plan for a people mover serving these venues, and then it was struck down. So, we're working with a clean slate here. And in having this clean slate, I propose having rapid transit serve this area, and at that, the highest capacity form of rapid transit in the form of subways. That's for two reasons. First, because it would reduce congestion heading to and from events at these venues. And second, because so long as we serve alcohol at sporting events and concerts, it is just plain old common sense to provide great transit to and from these venues if we want to reduce the likelihood of drunk driving accidents after these events. That second point is a hill I will die on, and I may make a video about that at some point. Turning my attention to the areas that this line would serve south of these venues, I really like how the proposed line would serve some densely populated areas. This includes Lenox, a census-designated place that has over 21,000 people per square mile; Hawthorne, a city with a population density of over 14,000 people per square mile; and Lawndale, a city with a population density of over 16,000 people per square mile. For some perspective, these three places, which are right next to each other, would combine to have nearly 40,000 people more than Daly City, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, with a population density significantly higher than that of Daly City. Yet, these three places combine for 0 trains currently, while Daly City has the 8th busiest station in the San Francisco Bay Area's heavy rail system. I know comparing LA to San Francisco is like comparing apples and oranges, but I highlight Daly City to show the sort of ridership that I think is possible if you bring rail transit to this part of the LA area. And, for icing on the cake, this proposed line would serve a large community college and a transit center. The stops by said community college and said transit center also have the potential to be significant ridership drivers. Though, speaking of ridership, what would the ridership for this line be like? Just for fun, I'll provide my ridership estimate based on data I have and explain how I reached that ridership estimation. I estimate that this line would have about 80,000 riders on the average weekday, if this line existed in isolation without any other transit improvements. In making this estimate, I considered 3 factors. First, the already high demand for buses on Western, oftentimes over 25,000 riders on a weekday. Second, the significant demand I anticipate from people in the LA area heading to or from the major events in Inglewood. And third, the densely populated areas this line would serve south of Inglewood's entertainment complex. I must emphasize that this estimate is only based on if the line exists in isolation without any other transit improvements in the LA area. With those other transit improvements I proposed, the most notable of them for the purposes of this line being the Santa Monica Boulevard subway and a rail line along Venice and Pico Boulevards, it's a proposed line with the potential to have over 100,000 riders on a weekday, in my opinion. I'm curious to hear others' thoughts on this proposed line, as well as my ridership estimate. Let's talk about your thoughts on my proposal in the comments section below. Thank you, and have a good day.